Welcome so much. Welcome, Kenneth, for joining us on today's podcast episode of Catholics Live in Discipleship. Kenneth is the Director of Family and Respect Life in the Diocese of Manchester, New Hampshire. Go New Hampshire. I'm a native New Hampshire. Love New Hampshire. So thank you so much for being here with us as we talk about the importance of building a stronger sense of Catholic community at our parishes and the challenges that we face with that, but yet why it's so important. So welcome on the podcast, Kenneth.
Thank you for having me, Darren. And if you're from New Hampshire, then I'm sure you can have practice some solidarity with me because it's really cold.
Yeah.
It's
And
literally like
it's
7 degrees outside right now.
yeah. And it's funny because my wife is from California
Oh, wow.
and Texas. So this time of year, she does not like. This time of year, I literally love the cold. We were in Florida for Thanksgiving. Very unusual for us, but we went down to visit our son. We come back, and I'm like, this is the weather we're supposed to have for Thanksgiving. you know?
I also like the cold. I like the cold because it forces you to be cozy, and
Yeah,
I like that feeling of coziness, like
yeah,
blankets. Having a fireplace in New Hampshire is just
yeah,
essential to get through the winter. It's so beautiful, and I love jackets, hats, scarves, sweaters, all that stuff. I just
yeah,
don't like having to drive in it. If I had a snowmobile where I could just use a snowmobile to get around, it'd be great.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but I also appreciate the cold. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's such a beautiful state. Such a beautiful state.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I reached out to you because I heard of your work with developing Catholic communities and your focus and your desire and your passion for that. And I just thought we'd have a conversation around the importance of doing that, the importance of really fostering community at our parishes. And also, there's challenges to it, but there's also a great need for it. So, yeah. So if we start with, what do you see are some of the contributing factors that's challenging when it comes to fostering Catholic community?
Yeah. So first, I would say that I guess I need to color and preface everything with that. This is my experience of dioceses and parishes that I've worked with. There's a saying in diocesan work that if you've worked with for one diocese, you've worked for one diocese.
So
There's a
true.
lot of diversity and variation across the church in our country and stuff like that. But I do think that there are some trends that we can pay attention to. So when I look at parishes today, I don't really see the main crisis being one of theology or liturgy. Obviously, there are differences of opinions on those things, and I think there are still problems to work out with like liturgies and things like that. But generally speaking, I really see the main crisis in our parishes being one of belonging, right? That people aren't really starving for more information or catechesis about the faith. We live in a time period where a person has the most access to the knowledge of the faith than ever before, right? You don't necessarily really need to go to a parish to receive instruction about the faith per se, because you can watch Father Mike Schmitz, you can watch Bishop Barron, you can go, the information is there and is more accessible than it's ever been before. What I think people are really starving for, what they want, even if it's kind of subconscious, like deep down when they're going to a parish, is that they're starving for communion, real, authentic communion, to feel known, seen, to kind of be held by a spiritual family. This is certainly true, I think, in my experience of working with the young, right? Because technology is, in this weird sort of way, distanced us from one another. that young people are starving for real, authentic connection and relationships. So, and I think this is the same for people who go to mass like once a month and people who come to church multiple times a week, every Sunday, right? That the biggest contributors of people being disengaged from the parish really is just a feeling of isolation. So when people walk into a parish and they ultimately feel like strangers next to
Hmm.
people and they haven't had like real human encounter, that human encounter is what opens up the door to an encounter with Christ himself, right? And this essentially makes sense because God himself is a relationship. So I think as a church, we might have underestimated how essential community is to discipleship, right? It's not just the content, it's not just like fancy programs, right? The early church didn't grow because of brilliant programs, right? I mean, it grew because people saw a way of life where others loved each other, prayed together, suffered together, and lifted each other kind of out of these dark, hard moments that every human family goes through. So I feel like the world can be loud, especially nowadays. It's so filled with noise. It's lonely. I would say there's a crisis of loneliness. So if our parishes aren't places where people can experience real, authentic relationship and communion,
Hmm.
then they're just going to remain places where people simply attend, right? Rather than be places where they can allow themselves to be transformed by God. So, um,
Yeah, and Ken, just to support that, what you said about people attending mass, right? And people do go to mass.
yeah,
It is a community sacramental experience, but do people feel as if they're community? And just to support that, you know, what I do is I help parishes form ministries and leadership. I help the pastor create different types of initiatives. And most of them are centered around small groups. And it just amazes me how often I hear when we ask the question, how has this impacted you, the participants, that one of the first answers is I have I've been able to get to know the people I go to mass with on a regular basis who I don't know. I see their faces, but I don't know them.
mhm,
And these are people who Sunday after Sunday after
yeah,
Sunday are in the pews. And it just speaks to exactly what you're saying. And I'm sure people who are listening to this podcast, parish leaders, pastors, or even just people who are listening, general Catholics, I'm sure you can agree to that, relate to that. That no, I don't know the people who sit two pews behind me, though we should. We're family.
yeah. It's almost like somewhere along the way, we all kind of forgot that faith is lived in relationships, right? That we can't really grow spiritually without growing in relationships, right? Because again, like God himself is a relationship, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So his grace is essentially mediated through people, right? So, um, and I think that's the crisis is like people have kind of because of how things maybe have almost gotten too programmatic that we've lost the sense of family and familiarity, right? People don't longer see parishes as a place for family, right? They see um, that as something different. And so, and that feeling of family doesn't happen by accident. Like it takes intentional work to create that kind of community for sure.
Yeah, and I also often find too, and this isn't I'm not trying to be judgmental or criticize. I think I say this in a way to help us become more aware and awaken. When oftentimes I hear pastors tell me that parishioners no longer desire to be engaged in a narthex, they walk right out the door,
Mm.
right? They're already off to the next thing. And um, trying to engage them in the narthex with some initiative, Advent gathering, Lent gathering, Bible study, whatever, they just walk right by it. And I think part of what is happening is we have become so individuals in our faith journey. I want my journey to be strong. I want to be a strong Catholic, and that's all I'm worried about.
Mhm.
That we kind of lose, like just like what you said, we've lost touch with this is a journey we're supposed to be on together, meant to be on together to support one another. Hey, I'm glad you're growing stronger and you have a desire to grow stronger in your faith. What about the witness aspect? What about the accompaniment aspect? What about having a desire to help others who are struggling with their faith to be where you are? That's what the
You're
community
you're
aspect
hitting on
brings.
something that I think is um, really important to speak to. So I give this talk. I've given it lots of times in all sorts of different places. I change the title depending on the audience, but typically it's like called The Psychology of Holiness, How to Become a Better Christian. And there's this people often ask, like when they hear like we're made in the image and likeness of God, like, well, what does that mean? What about me is God like? What about me is made in his image? The Catechism tells us actually very specifically the three ways which make us in God's image. It's our capacity for self-knowledge, our capacity for self-possession, which means to be in control of oneself, to like make good decisions for myself, and then our capacity for self-gift, right? So, and this is circular. The more that we come to know about ourselves, the more we're able to make good decisions for ourselves, to love ourselves, the more we're able to give ourselves to others, right? So God is a God that's in relationship with himself in order to give of himself, right? So if I meet people, whether they're pastors or other human beings, and they're talking about,
Now, wait a minute,
you
Kenneth. I
know,
just want to double
yeah,
check. Pastors are human beings, right?
of course, yeah, 100%. Yes, they are.
Just want to clarify
Yes, they are.
that.
100%. Um, if somebody's talking about, like I just really want to focus on my own spiritual life and people aren't being communal, then it's a red flag for me. So then I actually call into question how deep that person's spiritual life would
Hmm.
be, right? There's this old psychologist, his name is Alfred Adler. You would know him as the guy who kind of came up with the idea that like firstborn children are this way, secondborn children are kind of like this way, or an idea of if you've ever heard of an inferiority complex or superiority complex, that's Alfred Adler. Alfred Adler had this theory about like mental health that essentially it was really easy to be able to determine whether somebody had good mental health, and it was just what he called social interest. So if that human being didn't have a desire to help others around them, to be engaged in their community, then they were not mentally healthy because that's
Hmm.
what a mentally healthy person does. And I think this actually perfectly lines up with the Christian life because the whole kind of ethos of Christian life is self-knowledge, self-possession, self-gift. It's to give yourself away. So if you are close to Christ, if you have a healthy spiritual life, you're going to have a natural desire, an impulse to be active in your community, right? Because that's the effect of drawing close to Christ, is to do that. So anyone who doesn't have that desire, then to me, that's where I need to start. Like it starts with our personal encounter with the Lord. Like, are you really encountering the Lord? Are you praying? Right? Or are you just kind of listening to things on your ride home and kind of trying to fit Jesus into your life? Because if you're really offering yourself to the Lord, you're going to want to offer yourself to people around you. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's in really well.
Yeah. One of the things that I work on practicing, I do it. I can certainly improve, right? Um,
We all can.
is reaching out to others, you know, calling them, seeing how they are. I'm fortunate to work with many parishes and fortunate to get to know many people, and so therefore, I call them as a Christian friend to see how they are, and also to share my faith with them, right? And I think that's one way to begin to help build community. A suggestion, if I may,
Yeah, sure.
that when we're engaging our parishioners, key leaders, volunteers, whoever you're engaging, to encourage them to say, who are you getting to know in our community
100%. Yeah.
that you may know just a little bit? It's easy for us to get to know those who we already know.
Hmm.
And that's good. We should continue to build those relationships. Absolutely. We accompany one another. We need those types of friends in our lives. But who are the newer people? You
Yeah.
know, who are the newer people? But so what are some of your ideas, Kenneth, about we have these challenges at the parish, right? Of building community. We kind of spoke about isolation, in our faith journey, maybe not even being aware as much as we should be about how we are called to journey with others. What are some of your ideas or thoughts about how do we help shift that in parishes and really start to foster a stronger sense of Catholic community?
Yeah, I think the good news is I don't think it actually requires us to kind of reinvent the wheel. I think there is, if you look at the history of the church and how the church was formed, there are just simple kinds of practices that have happened all throughout the church's existence that we just kind of need to tap and to learn from. So I think it starts. I think there are like two main things that parishes could really do to help build community. Um, it certainly, to me, in my head, starts with creating small places where people can connect meaningfully, right? So you brought up the idea of like small groups. I think this is a wonderful idea. So not doing like big events at first, but having small human conversations. So how does a parish do that? I think a parish tries to look at their community. Every community is different, right? Every parish can be different. This parish over here, the vast majority of people might be retirees for whatever reason. Okay. You have a parish over here, and for whatever reason, they have a large young adult community. Okay. You had a lot of young families over here. You have a lot of families with teenagers, whatever, it just takes kind of a simple kind of looking at your demographic, right? And then doing focused ministries on specific groups, small groups of people. You could say like engaged couples, newly married couples, young families, parents with teens, empty nesters, whatever. Every single one of these groups shares a particular kind of hope and struggle. So if you create intentional gatherings for those people that really have these shared experiences, um, something simple like a monthly dinner or discussion night community grows naturally in that way, right? So um, you build kind of little like micro communities that become the backbone of the parish.
Mm.
And now here's the important part. So to give you an idea of something I'm doing at my parish, I happen to be like an artsy kind of guy. So I started this artistry society in New Hampshire. So there's like a group of 12 of us and we all do different things. I like storytelling. We have painters, blah, blah, blah. And National Marriage Week is coming up in February. It's like February 7th through the 14th. And it's all a week where the church is celebrating marriage. And I was like, well, why don't we just have a small night where obviously I'm a parishioner at our cathedral, so it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place, and we have this beautiful chapel that's smaller and even more beautiful than the main sanctuary. We're just gonna light it up with candles. I'm gonna write like with two other couples. We're gonna tell like a marriage story, a story about marriage. It's gonna be like a half hour. And then we're gonna have singers sing traditional Catholic hymns in between the story. And then we're simply going to go back into Father's Rectory and have some wine and cheese. And some of our artists are going to have art displayed that revolves around marriage. And we're just going to hang out and talk. It's actually not like a huge production, but it's something small that's specifically focused on married couples for married couples, right? So then how do we get people to come to something like that? This is where I think it can be kind of hard for parishes to do this. So you start small, you have a small group. Those people that you're seeing at Master and that you're like, oh, I recognize those people, but I've never really talked to them. You have to go invite them personally.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's really the special sauce
Yeah.
is personal invitation, right? Not just putting it in the bulletin, not expecting Father just to make notes about it, at the end of Mass, not just putting it on the parish website. It is having the courage to go up to somebody and say, hey, see you here all the time. Like to get to know you guys a little bit better. Why don't you come to this small gathering and see what happens?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's personal invitation.
Yeah. And
But then, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, yeah, I was just going to say, because this just crossed my mind. When we do something outside of the parish, and right now we just happen to be recorded in Advent leading up to Christmas, and um, that's what we do. We do personal invitation.
Hmm.
We personally invite people over. We personally invite people to dinner. Like I got a text message this morning from a friend saying, hey, next Saturday, can we go out to dinner? But it's just so funny because again, working with so many key volunteers and leaders at parishes, when we're talking about events like this, what are they saying? They're saying that the pastor has to do a pulpit announcement to get people to the event that they desire to have.
Yeah.
They're not saying, I'm going to make sure that at Mass, I'm going to speak to 20 people and personally invite them.
Yeah.
That, just like
What
you said, that's the secret sauce. We do it
here's a
outside of the parishes. Why don't we have that expectation inside?
I'll tell you something that's been super successful for me at my own parish. And again, I think it speaks to like in a moment of our time period. But I have put together like little evenings, for our parish revolved around certain things, whether that happens at the parish or at my house or somebody else's home. I will create invitations or notes and mail it to those people,
Mm-hmm.
inviting them in that kind of old way of like, here's a formal invitation that you can tell that I spent time on creating. It's not just like copy and paste. And the response that we've gotten when you do that and then you follow up in person, it's been incredible because people feel special. They feel seen, like, oh, this person went out of this way to like take a note, stamp it, do whatever, mail it to me, and then follow up. That person's serious. They actually want me here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just like a small thing that I think touches people, especially in today, because everything's done through technology. So when you
Yeah.
kind of do something old school, it hits them like a little bit different. So, and then I think what I constantly tell pastors and parish leaders is when you start small, or even if you eventually go to like bigger events, getting some of those small groups to commune with each other. The important thing is to stay consistent, not to be disheartened by low numbers, right?
Hmm.
Everyone wants things to be successful, but that's not how things start, right? So things start small, you minister to the people that do come, and you don't give up. And
Yeah.
eventually, when people see that there's consistency in the parish, that things are consistently happening, other people who may have not come at the beginning see, oh, okay, they're serious about this. And it also allows time for the best kind of advertising, which is just word of mouth, right? And the consistent, so like you're at Mass, you ask a family to come. We're really busy. Don't let that be the last time that you invite them. I mean, don't
Hmm.
invite them like every week to something. You don't want to like seem like desperate or intrusive, but don't, keep inviting them, keep showing them that they're wanted, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
once people kind of taste belonging, then they start to evangelize themselves. I mean, that's just how it works.
Yeah. And, I'm sure you experienced this when you have started those types of gatherings, and let's just say, oftentimes I'm doing small groups. It's come to the end. They don't want to end. Those
Yeah.
small groups, they're like, well, what can we do to continue this? You
Yep.
know? So you're right. Like we can't become discouraged. I think one of the things that what you're making me think about is I've run large initiatives like Christ Life and other types of long um, initiatives, that are weeks and weeks and weeks. That I believe these types of initiatives are very beneficial for parishes. But I think what tends to happen is over time, we, and I know this has happened with me, I just assume that because the parishioners know about it so well now, that they themselves are just going to start attending, and we lose sight of this personal invitation.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about this one initiative at this one parish where I've seen the attendance come down, and they've been doing it at the parish now for about 4 or 5 years. And I think it's because they've just have taken it for granted that people are going to know about it and attend, and lost sight of that personal invitation. That has to always be ongoing, you know.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So so what would you, I mean, how do we encourage people to even take this step, like to shift the culture? That's quite a buzzword in parish life right now, is shifting the culture in many things, the maintenance to mission, or shifting cultures is big at the parish.
Yeah.
But what would be some of your recommendations or encouragement for people to take a step that could help shift the culture a little bit?
Yeah. So I tend to tell parish leaders, right, that a lot of times parishes are waiting for the perfect moment or to have the right people in place, or, I don't have this person to do this and this person to do that. And I'll say, God doesn't wait until you have the perfect team before he starts writing a story for your community and parish, right? So most of the great movements in the church started with one or two people, right, whose hearts were really burning
Hmm.
with love, which is great, right? So every parish, at least in my experience, has at least one or two people that fit that bill, right? Um, So you start simple by inviting people personally, those people, right? Just start inviting people personally to small things. So community is built one small invitation at a time. Um, call three couples, invite a few parishioners to coffee conversation, right? Just that, I think that's where it starts. The encouragement is like just start small. It doesn't have to be something big. Just invite a family out to coffee, right? Or have them over for dinner, right? Um, and oftentimes, especially in our diocese, which happens to be pretty rural, people do get discouraged, right? There's the ruralness, and then there's kind of like New England culture, which there's a saying in New England, it's like good neighbors build good fences.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's kind of like just kind of staying private. Um, but I always tell people like you just don't believe like your smallness or whatever disqualifies you from ministry, right? The Holy Spirit has always done his best work through those who feel inadequate, right? We all feel inadequate. Every parish hurts in different ways, right? The mission of building community is not about being large or being impressive and garnering all this attention. It's just about being available, right? And wanting people to come in. So that starts with prayer, humility, and a willingness to listen to the people at your parish, right? So I'll tell pastors, God will send you leaders that you need, right? And oftentimes they're probably people that you haven't expected.
Hmm.
A quiet couple that sits in the back pew, a retired parishioner that's struggling with finding purpose, in their
Hmm.
later years, or a young adult who's just like craving to take a leadership position and do something, right? So the encouragement that I would want to give people is that if you keep that in mind, you keep that smallness in mind. I think of like Saint Therese of Lisieux, right? In her little way. That's again, I used this phrase before, but that's like the magic sauce, the special sauce is like it takes time. We have to have a certain level of patience, but I've just seen it with my own eyes. When you start small and you just have a few families that start asking other families to come to things, it grows. The
Yeah.
spirit absolutely moves. And so that's the encouragement that I try to give is like God is perfect. God will do what God does as long as we kind of, in a sense, remember how we're made in his image and likeness, which is built through relationships, right? And I know that can be hard because having relationships implies a certain level of authenticity and vulnerability, and that's really difficult. And that's why it's important that, yeah, that we have people at our parishes who are willing to take that risk, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about, and I've seen this happen at other parishes as they're as they have grown in awareness we need to gather people, is creating a space. Doesn't have to be an elaborate space, but when I'm thinking about this one particular parish where they had plenty of meeting rooms, with the table in the middle and chairs around, but none of those rooms had a side table, maybe with a coffee pot and cups and small refrigerator. But to have that space where people can go and be community, and it's not just a space for meetings, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that's super. So now you're touching on something there that's like a big dream of mine. And I do understand that this dream is um I mean it would be a lot. So I understand, I can get
Dream
people.
on, Kenneth, dream
Yeah,
on.
it's like, oh, that's impossible. I'm like, well, maybe it's not very probable, but I think the point that I'm trying to make is valid, which is, the things that are successful at my parish, which is the cathedral is not because our parish hall is great. Our parish hall is not great. Like it's a basement, right? With a bunch of plastic tables and plastic chairs. But what's really nice is Father's living room,
Yeah.
which is like old New England wood fireplace. And when, we're lucky to have such a loving pastor who opens his home. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes on inside Father's living room, and it feels like a home. So when I
Hmm.
was counseling there, people would say this all the time. My counseling office was in this old historic mansion in Denver, and it was split up into little offices, but it used to be somebody's home. So that helped. And then I decorated my office in a way where people would say all the time, I just feel so comfortable here. It feels like a home.
Yeah.
So my big dream is that, instead of like a parish hall, instead of like a parish building, a parish hall, that they would build a house.
Mm.
And it would just be kind of like a house that's owned by the parish, but that would be used for ministry purposes. So people could have a living room to meet in, like an actual kitchen, like a dining room, and it would just feel more homey, right? And I
Hmm.
understand, sometimes you need a space for large, large events. Like I get that. And, you do what you can. But even those big meeting spaces, you can transform and make more cozy, right? We go back kind of full circle to the coziness. Most people like feeling cozy, right? They
Yeah.
they like that feeling, whether they live in Arizona or, they live in, in New Hampshire. So I do think that that's kind of like my big dream is that more parishes would find a way to use people's homes for
Hmm.
ministry purposes as opposed to everything happening in these kind of like, you know, they're functional, large meeting spaces or whatever, but just making something. I think of Soren, um, is it Soren Johnson down in Virginia? He started Trinity Home, but they have this coffee shop anyway, and it's a house that's been transformed into like a coffee shop meeting place, and it's been super successful down in Virginia. Things like that. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something my priest did, by the way, I have to, Father Jason is just incredible. He has this big old rectory. Now, granted, he has like five priests that live with him, so this is really great for him. He gets to live in community and share the space, but he's still old Catholicism, so it's very large. So not only did he open like a bookstore in his rectory, he also opened up a barber shop. Like he was like, I just want a place where guys can come get haircuts and have this be like a ministry. So he literally like bought a single barber chair and converted a room in his house into a barber shop.
Oh, cool.
And he has a barber come in like 2 or 3 days a week, and people from the parish and outside of the parish like sign up to get their hair cut, and it's like donation based,
Wow.
right? And so they just get to sit there like in the movies with three or four guys and like
Yeah.
talk as they're getting
Yeah.
their hair. He's so ingenious. I was just like, Father, this is great, like I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just
Well, it makes
genius
me
is great.
think I think that's so great. It makes me think to say, for those who are watching or listening, what are the ways in which you're starting to build community, or what are some of the initiatives at your parish that helps foster community in the way that we're talking about, because
Yeah.
there are I don't want this podcast to sound as if we aren't doing that as a church. We are in many, many ways. We're just trying to encourage people to do more of it or get started in doing it at your parish. But I'm sure there's many. I'd love to hear
Oh, sure.
from people,
So the biggest thing that I've done in my own life is like first I identified again kind of like a small group of people that I wanted to have more intentional relationship with. For me, that was artists. I wanted like a small group of people who we could sit around and talk about art and how God influences our artistic endeavors and to help each other. So I just started talking to people. I started talking to people at my parish, talking to my pastor who's an artist, blah blah blah. And now we have this small little artistry society, and we do some pretty cool things with each other, right? And we're getting to know each other and giving back to the community because that was my whole point. Like we're going to come together as artists, but then we're going to share our art with the wider community, right? So that's a perfect place to start. It's just like, well, who do you want to hang out with? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you have in, like, you want to find in common and to do that? And then at our parish, there are people who do other things, right? I'm not the only person that does stuff at our parish, but obviously because I'm the director of, like marriage and family, I have a special heart for marriage. So that's again like a little subgroup of people at my parish that I specifically feel called to cater to. I want to talk about marriages. So again, Father loves creativity, so he allows his parishioners to come up with some awesome ideas. So I already explained about one about like our little night for marriage. We've done small little like dinner gatherings where we just invite couples to come have dinner. Again, in Father's Rectory, and me and three other couples will make dinner. There's a parish that's close by that does what I think is a wonderful idea. This is a great idea. They do kind of like a Catholic supper club. So the thing is like every month, couples will, one couple will meet with three other couples. So there's four couples. The hosting couple provide like hosts at their house and provides the main meal, and then the three other couples bring sides and drinks and things like that. And then every month it rotates, right? And so every month you're meeting three new couples and taking turns hosting and stuff. So this was super successful when I was newly married and I met one of my best friends that way,
Mm.
right? So like his name's Zach, and he was recently married to Ashley, and we just hit it off, and he became one of my best friends. And that was just because, once a month, small little supper club, meeting somebody new, taking turns hosting. It's not happening specifically at the parish, it's happening inside people's houses. Um, and all that takes is just for somebody at the parish to kind of organize it, right? Which is a pretty simple Excel spreadsheet,
Yeah. Yeah.
line up. This is what's going on,
Yeah.
and then personally inviting people. Like, we would love it, if you would participate in this, and because we think you'd be a great host, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kenneth, this has been great having this conversation with you. It's you know what it's making me think about is I think we should come back because what we started today is really a conversation about how do we shift, like how do we get started, how we start developing community and talking a lot about small groups, so to speak, identifying, but maybe I can have you come back and we can talk about the impact these have in our lives.
Oh, sure.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like we're not doing, I mean, definitely we're doing this to build community, but in these gatherings, the gospel message certainly is being shared in many ways and it's impacting people's lives. So
Yeah.
maybe I'd love to have you come back and do another episode about ways in which it can and has impacted people's lives. So,
There's some great stories, Darren. So yeah, that,
yeah,
that could be a whole
yeah,
nother episode itself for sure.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
definitely works. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for being here, Kenneth. It's been great. And I will definitely twist your arm to come back and we'll talk about the impact.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me, Darren.
All right. God bless everybody. Hope you enjoyed the episode and we'll see you next time.